Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step quietly onto the deck of a creaking ship as it glides into Boston Harbour at first light. The sky is still pale and streaked with pink, and the water around you smells faintly of salt tar and something less romantic that you cannot quite identify yet. Gulls wheel overhead, already wide awake and loudly unimpressed with your arrival. You lean against the rail, blinking away sleep, trying to imagine what life here will actually be like. It looks peaceful enough from a distance. Rows of wooden buildings climb gently up from the waterfront church steeples, pointing like careful fingers toward the sky. Then the breeze shifts and brings with it a sharper reality check. Smoked fish guts, damp wool, and human waste mingle in a fragrance that politely suggests you probably will not survive this without at least a few unpleasant surprises. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. You step carefully down the gangplank boots, touching the solid wood of the wharf. The boards feel slick beneath your feet. They have soaked up years of seawater, spilled cargo, and hurried footsteps. Around you the harbour is already alive. Men shout to one another in accents from England, Scotland, Ireland, and places you have never heard named aloud. A cart rattles past, piled high with barrels that smell faintly of molasses. Somewhere nearby, a hammer strikes iron with a steady ringing patience. This busy harbour is not just a local hub. It is one small but important node in a vast Atlantic world. Ships arrive from the Caribbean, carrying sugar and rum from Britain, with textiles and tools, and from other colonies with timber and grain. Trade is the lifeblood of Boston in the 1760s. A widely accepted historical point is that maritime commerce forms the backbone of the town's economy. You can feel it immediately. Everything seems to move with purpose. Even the gulls appear to be working. You pause to take in the scene. Ropes creak against wooden masts. Sailcloth flaps like tired flags. The air tastes faintly metallic on your tongue. You realise that every object around you has a story. Every crate might contain goods that will shape someone's fortune or ruin someone else's. A man brushes past you with an armful of nets, muttering under his breath. Another balances a ledger and quill, trying to keep accounts while dodging puddles. The town feels at once energetic and precarious. One wrong step could send you sliding into cold harbour water, or tumbling into an argument about unpaid debts. You notice something else as you move farther inland. The streets are narrow, not charmingly narrow in a quaint modern sense. Narrow in a way that makes you instinctively draw in your elbows. Houses crowd close together as though huddling against the wind. Their windows stare down at you with a certain suspicion. You begin to understand that privacy here is not so much a right as a rare luxury. Scholars continue to debate whether Boston's crowded design is purely a result of geography or also reflects deeper social habits carried over from English towns. Standing here, you suspect it is both. The land itself seems to encourage closeness. The people appear to accept it with a mixture of resignation and pride. A boy darts past barefoot despite the chill. He laughs as he goes, chased by a barking dog. His joy cuts briefly through the morning's seriousness. You cannot help smiling. Life here is not only toil and tension. It is also small bursts of vitality that refuse to be ignored. You follow the street as it curves gently uphill. The ground is uneven, packed dirt scattered with straw and bits of refuse. Your boots crunch over something that might once have been a shell, or perhaps a broken piece of pottery. You decide not to investigate too closely. This is one of those moments when curiosity might lead to regret. There is a faint sweetness in the air now. You turn and see a baker opening his shop. The scent of fresh bread drifts towards you like a promise. It feels comforting after the harsher smells of the harbour. You realise how powerful food aromas can be in shaping your mood. Even in a town that tests your senses, there are moments of warmth. A curious tidbit often mentioned in passing is that some Boston residents keep pigs wandering freely through the streets to help dispose of scraps. As you stand there, you hear an unmistakable snuffling sound. You glance down and find yourself being calmly inspected by one such creature. Its bristly back brushes your coat before it ambles off in search of breakfast. You make a mental note to watch where you step. The town is waking fully now. Church bells begin to toll in the distance. Their sound rolls over the rooftops like slow waves. It is both soothing and slightly commanding. You feel an urge to straighten your posture, to look as though you belong here. Reputation matters in places like this. Even newcomers sense it. You pass a woman sweeping a doorstep with brisk determination. She pauses just long enough to nod at you. Her eyes are sharp. You get the impression that she notices everything. Perhaps she does. In a community this tightly knit, every face becomes familiar quickly. As you continue walking, the sunlight strengthens. It glints off window panes and catches in the dust hanging in the air. The warmth feels gentle on your skin. For a moment you forget your fatigue from the voyage. You feel instead a quiet anticipation. This town may challenge you, but it also invites you to learn its rhythms. You hear laughter from inside a nearby tavern even at this early hour. Someone is already telling a story, voice rising and falling with theatrical flair. You wonder how many such tales drift through Boston's streets each day. How many hopes and grievances mingle with the smoke and sea air. By the time you reach the crest of the hill, you turn back to look at the harbour. Ships rock softly in the morning light. Their masts form a forest of slender lines against the sky. It is strangely beautiful. You realise that life here will always balance between hardship and wonder. That tension hums quietly beneath every footstep. You draw a slow breath. The town stretches before you, dense and alive. Somewhere beyond these rooftops, new experiences wait. You feel both small and strangely awake. The journey into Colonial Boston has only just begun. You linger for a moment at the top of the hill, letting your breath settle as the morning brightens around you. From here, Boston seems almost orderly. Rooflines step down toward the harbour in uneven rows. Thin trails of chimney smoke rise into the soft sky. It is a peaceful picture if you keep your distance. Then you turn and step forward into the next narrow street, and the illusion fades like mist. The lane twists unexpectedly. It is barely wide enough for two carts to pass without one driver muttering a prayer. Wooden houses lean inward, their upper stories jutting over the road as though eager to overhear every passing conversation. You instinctively lower your voice, even though you have not said a word yet. There is something about this closeness that makes silence feel polite. A commonly accepted historical point is that Boston, in the 1760s, is one of the most densely settled towns in British North America. The population has grown faster than its streets have adapted. You can feel the pressure of it. Doors open directly onto the roadway. Windows sit at shoulder height. A stray cough from inside a home becomes part of the public soundscape. Your boots scuff the packed earth. The ground here is uneven, with shallow ruts carved by cartwheels and hardened by countless footsteps. You step around a puddle whose origin you wisely choose not to investigate. Somewhere nearby, a bucket sloshes as someone empties it out an upper window. The liquid splashes onto the street with an unapologetic thud. You quicken your pace. This constant proximity creates a peculiar intimacy. You hear breakfast conversations through thin walls. You smell stewing porridge before you see the kitchen fire that produces it. A baby begins to cry in one house and is soothed in the next. Life overlaps in ways that would startle you in a modern city. Here it feels inevitable. You pass a cluster of neighbours gathered at a doorway. Their voices are low but animated. Gossip flows as steadily as the harbour tide. News travels quickly in such confined spaces. A ship's arrival, a broken engagement, a rumour about new taxes. Everything becomes shared knowledge by mid-morning. Some researchers have suggested that Boston's cramped layout encourages this culture of watchfulness and conversation. Others believe the habit would exist regardless, shaped by religious values that prize moral accountability. Historians still argue whether the town's architecture creates its social vigilance or simply reflects it. As you move along, you suspect the two forces are intertwined like the beams in these overhanging houses. A rooster struts boldly across your path, followed by 3 chickens that appear to have no clear destination. Their feathers brush against your boots. You pause to let them pass, feeling oddly as though you are the intruder here. Behind them, a young girl carries a basket nearly as large as she is. She gives you a quick, curious glance before hurrying on. Childhood in this town seems brisk and purposeful. You reach a small open square where the buildings step back just enough to allow a patch of sunlight to pool on the ground. The sudden brightness feels like a gift. You stand in it for a moment, warming your hands. A man nearby sharpens a blade against a whetstone, the scraping sound steady and hypnotic. Sparks flicker like tiny stars before vanishing. The smells here shift constantly. Fresh bread from a nearby oven mingles with the sharper tang of tanning leather. A hint of pine resin drifts from stacked firewood. Then, just as you begin to adjust, the breeze carries another reminder that sanitation is more hope than reality in this century. You wrinkle your nose and continue walking. A quirky detail sometimes noted in diaries from the period is that neighbours borrow household items so frequently that ownership becomes a fluid concept. As you watch a woman carry a chair from one doorway to another, with confident familiarity, you begin to understand. In such tight quarters, survival often depends on cooperation. Privacy is rare. Possessions circulate like shared stories. A cart approaches its wheels, creaking in protest. You flatten yourself against a wall to let it pass. The driver nods in thanks, his hat tipped just enough to acknowledge your existence without inviting conversation. Social rules here are subtle but firm. You are expected to know your place, even if you are still figuring out where that might be. Overhead, laundry flutters between buildings on sagging lines. Shirts and petticoats sway gently in the breeze, casting moving shadows across the street. The fabric smells faintly of lye soap and river water. You brush against a sleeve and feel the coarse weave beneath your fingers. Comfort, you realise, is not measured by softness alone. It is measured by necessity. You turn another corner and find yourself facing a meeting house. Its plain wooden facade seems almost severe compared to the bustling homes around it. A bell begins to toll, slow and deliberate. The sound vibrates through your chest. It reminds you that time here is marked not only by the sun, but by communal expectation. A man sweeping the steps pauses to look at you. His expression is not unfriendly, but it is appraising. In a town this compact, strangers stand out like bright threads in dark cloth. You nod politely and move on, aware that your presence will likely be discussed before the day ends. As the morning advances, the streets grow busier. Apprentices hurry with bundles of tools. Women balance baskets of vegetables on their hips. A group of boys roll a hoop along the ground, shouting encouragement as it wobbles. The noise builds gradually, like an orchestra tuning its instruments. You begin to sense the rhythm of Boston. It is a rhythm of closeness, of shared burdens and shared observations. Every step you take becomes part of a collective movement. You cannot disappear here. You can only blend in. At the far end of the lane, you catch a glimpse of the harbour again through a narrow gap between houses. Sunlight flashes on the water, reminding you how recently you arrived. The town still feels new and overwhelming. Yet there is also a strange comfort in its density. It holds you in place, insists that you pay attention. You draw a slow breath and continue forward deeper into the maze of streets. Somewhere ahead, another aspect of daily life waits to reveal itself. You feel the quiet promise of discovery. The day stretches before you, full of sounds, scents and stories that will shape your understanding of this crowded colonial world. You follow the curve of the lane until the steady hum of voices softens into the more intimate sounds of household life. The street narrows further, then opens suddenly onto a row of small dwellings, pressed shoulder to shoulder like companions seeking warmth. Their wooden walls are weathered to shades of grey and brown, their roofs patched with shingles that seem to remember every storm they have endured. You pause before one door, unsure whether you are welcome. A faint glow flickers through the window, and the smell of smoke and simmering oats drifts into the morning air. You knock lightly. The door creaks inward, revealing a room that feels both humble and surprisingly alive. A mainstream understanding among historians is that most Boston families in the 1760s live in modest wooden houses with only a few rooms, each space serving several purposes. Standing in the doorway, you realise how fluid the idea of a room truly is. The same corner might be a kitchen at dawn, a workshop by noon, and a sleeping place after dark. The floor beneath your boots is rough plankwood, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. It feels cold even through your soles. A small hearth dominates the far wall, its fire burning with a steady orange glow. Sparks crackle softly as a pot swings on its iron hook. The warmth reaches you in gentle waves, carrying the comforting scent of bread crust and damp wool. A woman bends over the hearth, stirring with practiced rhythm. She glances up and offers a brief nod before returning to her work. Her sleeves are rolled high, her hands red from cold water and soap. You sense that her day began long before sunrise. Nearby, a child sits cross-legged on a stool, rubbing sleep from his eyes while watching the flames dance. His quiet fascination feels timeless. The ceiling beams hang low enough that you instinctively duck your head. A ladder leads upward to a loft where mattresses of straw are tucked beneath the rafters. The idea of privacy seems almost theoretical here. Even dreams must be shared. You imagine the sound of breathing at night, the rustle of blankets, the creak of timber shifting with the wind. Scholars continue to debate whether such close quarters foster stronger family bonds or simply greater tension. As you observe the easy familiarity between mother and child, you suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. Comfort grows not from space, but from routine. The hearth becomes the heart of everything. You run your fingers lightly along the surface of a wooden table. Its grain is scarred by knife marks and darkened by spilled meals. A curious tidbit recorded in some household accounts notes that tables often double as ironing boards, workbenches, and sometimes even makeshift beds for unexpected guests. Multipurpose living is not a modern invention. Here it is a necessity shaped by circumstance. Light filters through small panes of glass set in lead frames. The brightness is gentle, almost shy. You notice how dust motes drift through the beam like tiny travellers with no destination. Outside a cart rattles past, but inside the room feels wrapped in a softer rhythm. You hear the steady ticking of a wall clock. Its measured pulse seems to anchor the day. A man enters carrying an armful of split firewood. He stamps his boots on the threshold, shaking off mud and cold. His coat smells faintly of pine and sea air. You sense the fatigue in his shoulders, the quiet pride in his posture. Work here is constant, yet it also shapes identity. Each person seems defined by what they can endure. You are offered a seat on a narrow bench. The wood presses firmly against your back. Comfort is not luxurious, but it is sincere. A bowl of porridge is placed in your hands. Steam curls upward, warming your face. You taste the simple mixture of grain and salt and feel unexpectedly grateful. In this moment, nourishment feels like a small victory. The walls are sparsely decorated. A single framed print hangs near the hearth, its edges curled with age. A bundle of dried herbs dangles from a beam, releasing a faint earthy aroma. You wonder how many generations have gathered beneath this roof, sharing meals and worries in equal measure. You glance upward again, toward the loft. The ladder creaks as the child climbs it with careful determination. His footsteps echo softly through the beams. You imagine how winter nights must feel here. The wind pressing against the shingles, the fire struggling to keep the chill at bay. Yet there is also a sense of shelter of belonging within these rough boundaries. A faint knock sounds at the door. A neighbour steps in without waiting for permission, carrying a small parcel wrapped in cloth. She exchanges a few quiet words with the woman at the hearth, then leaves just as quickly. The interaction feels natural, almost choreographed. Community weaves itself through these walls like invisible thread. You notice the hearth's smoke curling upward toward a narrow chimney. Some of it escapes into the room, creating a hazy softness that blurs the edges of furniture and faces. You blink against the sting in your eyes. Fresh air is a luxury that must be balanced against warmth. Survival often involves choosing the lesser discomfort. As you finish your meal, you feel the slow easing of travel weariness in your bones. The steady heat, the muted sounds, the gentle routine, all invite a quieter state of mind. This house may be small, but it contains a whole universe of daily effort and quiet resilience. You rise to leave, offering thanks with a nod. The woman smiles briefly, her expression both kind and practical. Outside the street awaits with its noise and unpredictability. Yet you carry with you a new understanding. Life in colonial Boston is built not only on trade and politics, but on these modest rooms where families gather around flickering firelight. You step back into the daylight, the door closing softly behind you. The chill greets you again, sharper now that you have known the hearth's embrace. Ahead, more discoveries wait. The town continues to unfold, revealing its textures one careful moment at a time. You step back into the moving current of the street, still feeling the lingering warmth of the hearth in your hands. The morning air seems sharper now, filled with brisk purpose. Around you, people are adjusting coats, tying aprons, fastening buckles, with quick practiced gestures. It becomes clear that the day here begins not only with food and fire, but with the ritual of dressing for survival. You pause near a doorway, where a man struggles into a heavy wool coat. He pulls the garment tight across his chest, then secures it with a row of buttons that look almost decorative. You realise that clothing in this place is not merely about comfort. It is a statement, a shield, and sometimes even a quiet declaration of ambition. One broadly recognised truth about colonial Boston is that fabric and fashion communicate social standing as clearly as speech or property. A fine waistcoat can open doors, a patched sleeve can close them. You glance down at your own attire, suddenly aware of how it might be judged. Wool scratches faintly at your neck, linen clings coolly to your skin beneath the outer layers. Nothing feels effortless. Dressing is a negotiation with climate, with work, and with the watchful eyes of neighbours. A young apprentice nearby ties a kerchief around his throat, fingers fumbling with haste. His boots are stiff with mud. He stamps them once against the ground, sending a small cloud of dust into the sunlight. You feel the texture of the street underfoot, gritty and unpredictable. Clothing here must endure more than fashion. It must endure labour weather and the constant friction of crowded living. Some observers of the period note that garments are rarely owned in great number. Instead, they are mended repeatedly until the original fabric becomes almost a memory. You watch a woman sit on a low stool by her doorstep, needle flashing as she repairs a torn sleeve. Her concentration is fierce. Every stitch feels like an act of preservation. The air carries the smell of damp wool warmed by body heat. It is not unpleasant once you grow used to it. There is also the faint sweetness of soap, evidence of careful washing despite the challenges of hauling water. You brush your hand along the sleeve of a passerby and feel the coarse weave beneath your fingertips. Texture becomes part of your awareness. Nothing here is smooth without effort. A lesser-known habit mentioned in some personal accounts suggests that people occasionally scent their clothing with herbs or citrus peel when they can obtain it. As a breeze passes, you catch a fleeting hint of lavender. It vanishes quickly, replaced by the more familiar notes of smoke and leather. You find yourself oddly grateful for the brief fragrance, as though it were a small luxury shared with the entire street. You continue walking, watching how each person adjusts their garments to match the demands of the day. A merchant straightens his cuffs with quiet pride. A dockworker rolls his sleeves, high, exposing forearms marked by sun and rope burn. Even children participate in this choreography, tugging at stockings or smoothing wrinkled shirts with solemn determination. Modern specialists remain divided on how strictly fashion codes were enforced in colonial towns like Boston. Some argue that regulations shaped public behaviour more than personal choice. Others believe practicality often overruled official expectations. As you observe the variety of clothing around you, you sense a blend of both. Rules exist, yet daily life bends them into workable forms. You pause near a shop window where a display of imported textiles hangs like a promise. Deep blue cloth catches the light, its colour richer than anything you have seen so far. A man stands nearby, gazing at it with quiet longing. You recognise that clothing can represent more than warmth or status. It can symbolise aspiration, the hope of stepping into a slightly better version of oneself. The sound of buckles clicking shut echoes faintly in your ears. It becomes a rhythm of preparation. You feel the subtle weight of your own garments as you move the way they shape your posture and pace. Walking becomes a deliberate act. Running would feel almost rebellious in such attire. A sudden gust lifts the hem of your coat, sending a chill along your spine. You pull it closer, understanding why layers matter so deeply here. Weather changes quickly, and the town offers little shelter from its moods. Clothing is your portable refuge. You notice a group of women gathered near a well, their skirts brushing the ground as they talk. The fabric sways gently with each shift of weight. Their laughter rings clear bright against the hum of the street. For a moment, you see clothing not as burden, but as expression. Colour and movement create small sparks of beauty in an otherwise demanding environment. You reach a narrow corner where sunlight pools once again. The warmth seeps through wool and linen, softening the tension in your shoulders. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the murmur of voices and the distant cry of gulls. Dressing for the day has become more than a routine. It has become an initiation into the social fabric of Boston itself. When you open your eyes, the street stretches onward with fresh possibility. You feel more attuned now to the silent language of garments, to the way each thread connects individual lives to the wider community. The town continues to reveal itself through such details, guiding you gently deeper into its intricate rhythm. You continue along the winding street with a growing awareness of your own hunger. The simple porridge you tasted earlier has only sharpened your curiosity about what people here truly eat to sustain themselves through long days of labour. Ahead, the scent of baking bread grows stronger, guiding you toward a low building where a wooden sign creaks softly in the breeze. Inside, warmth greets you like a familiar hand. The room is filled with the comforting smell of grain and smoke, tinged with something faintly sour that you soon recognise as fermenting drink. A woman behind the counter arranges round loaves in careful rows. Their crusts are dark and firm, dusted lightly with flour. You feel your mouth water despite the roughness of their appearance. One widely acknowledged detail of life in colonial Boston is that daily meals revolve around simple staples such as brown bread, porridge, salted fish, and stewed vegetables. Variety exists, but luxury is rare. You accept a slice of bread offered to you and notice its dense texture as you tear off a piece. It feels hearty in your hands. When you taste it, the flavour is earthy and slightly sweet, as though it carries the memory of the fields where its grain first grew. Nearby, a group of men share mugs of small beer, a weak brew consumed throughout the day. Because clean drinking water is not always easy to trust, you lift a cup cautiously. The liquid is cool and faintly bitter, leaving a gentle warmth in your chest. It feels strange to begin the morning with ale, yet here it seems entirely practical. You sit on a narrow bench and observe the quiet ritual of breakfast. A child dips bread into a bowl of milk with solemn concentration. An older woman sprinkles coarse salt onto her porridge, then eats slowly, savouring each bite. Conversation remains subdued, as though the act of nourishment itself requires respect. Some observers from the period recorded an odd culinary custom in which molasses was sometimes mixed into baked goods or spread thickly over bread. As you watch a man drizzle dark syrup onto his meal, you understand how the sweetness might offer comfort in a demanding world. The aroma rises rich and almost caramel, like softening the harsher scents of smoke and damp clothing. Modern researchers remain uncertain about how frequently imported foods reached ordinary households in towns like Boston. Trade routes brought exotic ingredients within sight, yet access depended on wealth and circumstance. You glance at a small crate in the corner filled with citrus fruit. Its bright colour seems almost unreal. No one touches it. Perhaps it is reserved for someone with deeper pockets than yours. The sound of chewing and quiet murmuring fills the room. Wooden spoons scrape against bowls in a steady rhythm. You become aware of the tactile details of eating here. Bread flakes onto your lap. Your fingers grow sticky with syrup. The bench presses firmly against your back. Comfort comes not from luxury, but from the simple satisfaction of a full stomach. A young woman enters carrying a basket of eggs. She exchanges them for a sack of flour with a nod that feels like part of a long-practiced dance. Barter still shapes many transactions. Money changes hands less often than goods themselves. You sense the fragile balance of survival in each exchange. You step outside again, blinking at the brightness of the late morning sun. The air feels cooler now that you have known the bakery's warmth, yet the taste of bread lingers pleasantly on your tongue. You feel strengthened, ready to continue exploring. As you walk, you notice how food scents drift through the town like invisible signals. Smoke from cooking fires rises in thin threads. A pot of fish stew simmers somewhere beyond your sight. The mingled aromas create a map of daily life guiding your steps, even when streets twist unpredictably. You pass a group of sailors sharing a midday snack of hard biscuits. They laugh as one pretends to chip a tooth on the tough crust. Their humour carries a note of resilience. Meals here are not always about pleasure. They are about endurance. You begin to understand how deeply diet shapes mood and energy. A stray dog trots beside you for a few paces, sniffing at the crumbs in your hand. You toss him a small piece of bread, and his tail wags in grateful approval. Even animals seem woven into the food chain of the town, scavenging what they can from human routines. Further along, you see a woman hanging smoked fish from a line to dry. The salty scent reaches you before the sight does. You feel the roughness of the air against your lips, the way it carries flavours as well as sound. Eating here is never a private act. It is a shared experience, a communal necessity. You pause at the edge of a small square where sunlight pools warmly on the ground. The quiet hum of digestion settles in your body. You realise that meals in colonial Boston mark more than time. They mark survival itself. Each bite represents effort trade and the careful management of limited resources. With renewed strength, you continue walking, aware that the next part of the day will demand more from you. The town's rhythm pulls you onward. Hunger has been eased, curiosity awakened. Ahead, the promise of work and motion waits beneath the brightening sky. You leave the small square with steady steps, feeling the weight of breakfast settle into a quiet strength within your body. Around you, the town has fully awakened. Doors stand open, voices rise in sharper tones. Somewhere a hammer begins its relentless tapping, as if marking the true beginning of the working day. You realise that in Boston, labour does not politely wait for comfort. It arrives with the sun and expects your full attention. You follow the sound of tools striking wood until you reach a modest workshop. Inside, dust floats in pale streaks of light. The scent of fresh timber mixes with sweat and resin. A row of benches lines the wall, each cluttered with chisels, mallets, and half-finished pieces of furniture. The atmosphere hums with focus. Every movement feels purposeful. A well-established understanding of the period is that most people in colonial towns begin their tasks very early, often before daylight has fully spread across the sky. Work structures, the rhythm of existence. Apprentices learn by doing, servants carry out endless errands, and artisans shape raw materials into useful forms. You watch a young boy struggle to lift a plank nearly as tall as he is. His face tightens with effort. The man supervising him offers a brief nod of encouragement rather than sympathy. You step closer, running your fingers along the grain of a newly carved table leg. It feels smooth and warm, still holding the memory of the craftsman's hands. The air vibrates faintly with each strike of iron on wood. The sound becomes almost hypnotic. You sense how repetition builds both skill and endurance. Across the room, a small fire burns in a brazier, heating tools so they can be bent or shaped. The warmth radiates unevenly, creating pockets of comfort amid the general chill. You move into its reach for a moment, grateful for the brief relief. Outside, the wind rattles loose shutters. Inside, concentration holds the world together. Some diary entries from the era mention that apprentices sometimes slept in the same workshops, where they laboured, rising before their masters to prepare tools and sweep the floors. As you glance toward a narrow cot tucked behind a stack of crates, you can imagine such routines clearly. Rest and work blend into a single continuous demand. Researchers today remain divided on how much choice individuals truly had in selecting their occupations. Family tradition, economic necessity, and community expectations all played roles. Watching the steady determination on each worker's face, you suspect that survival often mattered more than personal ambition. You step back into the street and notice that the entire town seems engaged in similar effort. A woman carries bundles of laundry toward a communal washing area. Two sailors haul a coil of rope thicker than your arm. A merchant counts coins with quick, precise motions. The collective energy feels almost physical, pressing against your senses like a rising tide. The textures of labour surround you. Rough rope grazes your sleeve as you pass. A splash of cold water strikes your boots from a nearby bucket. Sawdust drifts onto your coat, clinging stubbornly to the wool. These small details anchor you in the moment, reminding you that work here is never abstract. It leaves marks on skin and fabric alike. You pause near a blacksmith's forge where sparks leap into the air like fleeting stars. The clang of hammer on metal rings through your bones. Heat pulses outward in rhythmic waves. You watch the glowing iron bend beneath steady blows, transformed into shape and purpose. There is something deeply satisfying in the process, even as you sense the toll it takes on the body. A lesser-known note from the time suggests that many labourers measured their days not by hours, but by tasks completed. The sun might still hang high in the sky, yet fatigue already settles into their shoulders. You begin to feel it too, a gentle heaviness that encourages slower breathing and careful movement. Nearby, a group of apprentices share a quick laugh while carrying a heavy beam. Their humour feels like a necessary release, a momentary escape from the discipline of their duties. You realise that camaraderie is as essential as strength. Without it, the day would stretch endlessly. You continue walking, letting the sounds of industry guide you deeper into Boston's pulse. Every corner reveals another form of effort. Women stirring vats of dye, boys delivering messages at a near run, men balancing ledgers with furrowed brows. The town functions like a living organism, each person a vital part of its circulation. The sunlight grows warmer as noon approaches. Sweat gathers at your temples despite the cool breeze. You wipe it away with the back of your hand, feeling the grit of dust against your skin. This is the texture of survival in the 18th century, honest, demanding, and impossible to ignore. For a moment you stop beneath the shade of an overhanging roof. The brief stillness feels luxurious. You listen to the layered sounds of Boston working around you, hammering footsteps, distant voices. The rhythm settles into your breathing, steady and reassuring. You sense that by learning this cadence, you are becoming part of the town's unfolding story. With a final glance at the bustling workshop behind you, you step forward once more. The day's labour continues, stretching ahead like a path that must be followed. Curiosity and fatigue walk beside you now, companions in this slow immersion into colonial life. You move onward, with the steady hum of labour still echoing faintly in your ears. The streets begin to widen almost without warning, opening into a busier stretch of town, where the smell of salt water grows stronger again. Ahead, the harbour draws you back like a familiar tide. The closer you get, the louder the world becomes. Wheels grind over rough stones. Sailors shout across the wharves. Somewhere a bell rings sharply to mark the arrival of cargo. The docks unfold before you in a long, uneven line of timber platforms, reaching into the water. Ships rock gently at their moorings, ropes pull tight like muscles under strain. Sunlight glitters on the harbour's restless surface. You feel the wind on your face, cool and bracing. It carries with it the layered scent of fish, tar-wet rope, and distant spices from lands you can only imagine. Trade shapes nearly every aspect of Boston's daily rhythm during this decade. The town thrives because goods move constantly through its harbour. Barrels of molasses, crates of textiles, bundles of timber, and sacks of grain all pass through these wharves. As you watch men roll cargo down narrow gangplanks, you sense how fragile this prosperity can be. One storm, one delayed shipment, one quarrel over taxes could disrupt everything. You walk along the edge of the dock, feeling the boards flex slightly beneath your boots. The wood is warm where the sun touches it, slick where waves have splashed and dried again. You steady yourself against a post wrapped in thick rope. Its coarse fibres press into your palm, leaving faint impressions on your skin. A merchant stands nearby, counting coins with deliberate care. His voice rises as he argues over the value of a shipment just unloaded. Words about weight, quality and payment tumble into the air like thrown stones. You notice how quickly tempers can flare when livelihoods depend on uncertain seas. Off to one side, a line of market stalls stretches along the waterfront. Women arrange baskets of onions, carrots and apples. A fisherman lays out his morning catch on a wooden table, scales flashing silver in the light. You pause to watch a buyer press a thumb into the flesh of a fish, testing its freshness with practiced confidence. Transactions here feel both urgent and routine, part of a choreography learned through repetition. There is a small detail mentioned in some surviving letters that makes you smile as you observe the bustle. Children often gather near the docks, not only to play, but to listen for stories from sailors returning from distant ports. As you pass a knot of wide-eyed youngsters hanging on every word of a weathered mariner, you sense the quiet magic of imagination at work. The harbour becomes their window to the wider world. Scholars examining this period sometimes question how evenly the benefits of maritime trade were distributed among Boston's residents. Standing here, You can see hints of inequality even in the crowd. Well-dressed merchants stride confidently past labourers whose shirts cling damply to their backs. Prosperity flows through the harbour, but it does not settle everywhere in equal measure. You step into the market lane where voices overlap in a lively weave. The air vibrates with bargaining. Someone laughs loudly. Someone else mutters in frustration. The textures of commerce surround you. Smooth fruit skins brush your fingertips. Rough burlap scratches against your coat. A stray drop of seawater lands cool on your cheek. A woman offers you a taste of pickled cabbage from a wooden tub. Its sharp flavour surprises you bright and tangy. You swallow quickly, feeling the way it awakens your senses. Food here often travels long distances before reaching the table. Preservation becomes an art as essential as cooking itself. Beyond the stalls, a counting house door stands open. Inside, clerks bend over tall desks, quills moving in careful strokes. Ledgers spread before them like maps of invisible journeys. Each line of ink records a risk taken or a fortune gained. You realise that trade involves not only ships and cargo, but also numbers and trust. You wander back towards the edge of the water. A gull swoops low its wings, whispering past your ear. The sudden rush of air makes you flinch, then laugh softly at your own surprise. Life near the docks keeps you alert. There's always movement, always the possibility of unexpected encounters. The afternoon sun glows warmly now, turning the harbour into a sheet of shifting light. You lean against a stack of crates and watch as a vessel slowly unfurls its sails. Canvas billows outward like a deep breath. The ship begins to glide away from the wharf, heading toward the open sea. You feel a quiet thrill of anticipation. Each departure carries hopes and uncertainties far beyond your reach. As the vessel shrinks against the horizon, the noise of the docks settles into a steady murmur. You become aware of the rhythm again. Boston pulses with commerce, with effort, with dreams tied to distant shores. Standing here, you sense how the town's identity is shaped by water and wind, as much as by streets and houses. You turn at last to leave the harbour behind, footsteps echoing softly on the worn boards. The day continues to unfold, guiding you toward new corners of colonial life. The energy of trade lingers in your thoughts, a reminder that every loaf of bread and bolt of cloth carries the story of a journey across restless seas. You leave the bright glare of the harbour behind and follow a narrower road that curves gently inland. The noise of trade softens into something more personal. Here the rhythm of the town reveals quieter layers of dependence and discipline. A row of modest houses stretches ahead, their doors open to the street as though inviting the day inside. You slow your pace, sensing that this part of Boston moves to a subtler tempo. A boy hurries past you carrying a bundle of folded linen nearly as large as his chest. His steps are quick, but careful eyes fixed on the ground to avoid stumbling. You watch him disappear into a doorway where a woman immediately begins sorting the cloth with brisk efficiency. Scenes like this unfold all around you. Service learning and obligation weave together in ways that shape almost every household. It is well known that many young people in colonial towns enter apprenticeships during childhood or early adolescence. Skills pass from master to learner through daily repetition rather than formal schooling. You can almost feel the weight of expectation in the air. Each errand completed correctly becomes a step toward independence. Each mistake carries consequences that may echo for years. You pause near an open window where the faint sound of recited instructions drifts outward. Inside, a young girl repeats her tasks for the morning as though committing them to memory. Her voice is soft but steady. The discipline required here feels intense. You wonder how often dreams of adventure are set aside in favour of duty. A narrow courtyard opens beside the house, revealing a cluster of servants gathered around a pump. They take turns filling buckets, their laughter rising in quick bursts before fading into quiet concentration. The scent of wet earth and iron fills your lungs. Water splashes onto your boots, cool and startling. You realise how physical even the simplest responsibilities can be. Some lesser-known accounts from the period describe how apprentices occasionally signed agreements binding them to years of labour in exchange for training, shelter and food. As you watch a young man sweep sawdust from a workshop floor with patient care, you begin to imagine the long path stretching ahead of him. Hope and fatigue walk side by side in his posture. A woman steps into the courtyard with a basket of mended clothing. She distributes the garments without ceremony, yet each recipient accepts them with visible relief. Fabric represents warmth, respectability, and survival all at once. You notice how quickly gratitude flickers across tired faces. Community support, however modest, becomes a vital thread in daily existence. Modern historians continue to examine how much freedom servants and apprentices truly possessed in choosing their futures. Some evidence suggests opportunities for advancement existed. Other records hint at hardship that left little room for choice. Standing here, you sense the complexity of both possibilities. Life unfolds through negotiation rather than certainty. You move closer to a workshop door left slightly ajar. Inside, an older craftsman demonstrates the careful shaping of a wooden bowl. His apprentice watches intently, hands clasped behind his back, as though afraid to interrupt the lesson. The scent of fresh shavings drifts toward you, warm and clean. Sunlight filters through the window, catching in the floating curls of pale wood. You brush a hand along the rough brick wall beside the doorway. Its surface feels cool and reassuring after the press of crowded streets. For a moment you rest there, listening to the gentle scrape of tools against timber. Learning here seems almost meditative. Skill emerges from patience rather than haste. A sudden burst of laughter draws your attention back to the courtyard. Two young servants share a joke while balancing heavy pails. Their joy feels brief but genuine, a small rebellion against the monotony of chores. You smile without thinking. Even in demanding circumstances, moments of lightness find a way to bloom. Further along the lane, you see a group of apprentices gathered around a table outdoors. They eat quickly from wooden bowls, barely pausing between bites. Time belongs to their masters as much as to themselves. Yet their quiet camaraderie suggests an unspoken understanding. Shared struggle often builds stronger bonds than comfort ever could. You continue walking, absorbing the layered sounds of obedience and aspiration, footsteps on packed earth, a broom's steady sweep, the low murmur of instruction carried on the breeze. These details settle gently into your awareness, shaping a deeper sense of what sustains the town beyond trade and politics. As the afternoon light begins to soften, you feel a subtle shift in mood. Work still dominates every corner, yet fatigue adds a slower cadence to each movement. Shoulders droop slightly, voices grow quieter. You sense how endurance defines the measure of a day. At the end of the lane you pause and glance back. The courtyard glows in the warm sun, its simple routines continuing without you. you carry forward a new appreciation for the invisible labour that holds Boston together. Service and training form the foundation upon which grander ambitions rest. With steady steps, you turn toward another street, ready to uncover the next layer of life in this intricate colonial world. The town unfolds patiently before you, offering its lessons one careful moment at a time. You step away from the courtyard with a lingering sense of quiet respect for the routines you have just witnessed. The lane widens slightly as you move on, and the air feels warmer now, carrying the soft fragrance of soap and wood smoke. Somewhere nearby, a door slams shut with a hollow echo. The town continues its steady pulse, yet the focus of your attention begins to shift toward another vital presence in colonial Boston. It is not always loud or publicly praised, but it is everywhere you look. You pass a small yard where a woman bends over a washtub, sleeves rolled high and skirt pinned carefully out of the way. Steam curls upward from the water, blurring the edges of her figure in the afternoon light. She scrubs with rhythmic determination, as though each stroke against the fabric were a promise to keep her household afloat. The sound of cloth being wrung out becomes almost musical in its repetition. It is widely recognised that women's labour forms the backbone of daily survival in 18th century towns. They cook, clean, mend, trade small goods, and manage countless tasks that rarely find their way into official records. As you watch the woman lift a sheet from the tub and shake it, sharply, droplets scatter like brief sparks. Her movements are efficient, practiced, and undeniably strong. You walk a little farther and notice another scene unfolding near an open doorway. Two women kneel beside a large wooden table shaping dough into neat rounds. Their fingers move with quiet speed. Flour dust floats in the sunlight, settling on their hair like pale snow. The smell of yeast and grain fills the air, comforting in its familiarity. You feel your own stomach stir again, reminded of how central bread is to life here. An unusual note preserved in some personal writings suggests that women often combined domestic duties with small-scale economic ventures, selling candles, baked goods, or stitched garments to neighbours. You see evidence of this in the basket of neatly wrapped loaves set beside the door. A young girl stands nearby, ready to carry them out for delivery. Enterprise and necessity intertwine in these modest transactions. A gentle breeze lifts the edge of your coat as you turn towards a narrow alley. Inside, you find a woman tending a small kitchen garden. Her hands move carefully among rows of herbs and greens. The scent of rosemary drifts upward as she trims the stem. The simple act of cultivation feels deeply hopeful, a quiet investment in the future. Modern scholars continue to examine how women balanced expectations of obedience with the practical authority they often exercised within households and communities. As you observe the confidence with which she manages her space, you sense that influence here is subtle but real. Power can exist without proclamation. You step closer to the garden fence, brushing your fingers against its rough wood. The texture grounds you in the moment. Bees hum lazily among the blossoms. Somewhere a child sings to himself while stacking kindling. These layered sounds create a tapestry of domestic life that feels both soothing and demanding. Beyond the garden, the street grows busier again. A woman strides past, carrying a bundle of firewood balanced expertly on her hip. Her pace is brisk, her expression focused. She nods at you without slowing, as though acknowledging a shared understanding of effort. You feel a flicker of admiration for her resilience. At the corner, you pause to watch a group of neighbours gathered around a spinning wheel set up in the open air. Threads stretch between their hands like fragile lines of connection. The wheel's steady whir becomes a kind of heartbeat. You realise how much patience and cooperation are required to transform raw fibre into clothing that will shield families from harsh winters. A faint memory surfaces of the lavender scent you encountered earlier. It returns now in the form of a sachet hanging from a doorway, its gentle fragrance offering a brief escape from the heavier smells of daily work. Small comforts matter deeply in a world where hardship is never far away. You continue along the street, noticing how often women pause to exchange news or offer assistance. A borrowed cup of flour, a shared warning about spoiled meat. These quiet interactions form an invisible network of support. Survival becomes a collective endeavour rather than a solitary struggle. Historians still explore how such cooperation shaped the social fabric of towns like Boston. Some argue it fostered resilience during times of crisis. Others suggest it reinforced expectations that limited individual freedom. As you walk, you sense both interpretations in the rhythm of conversation and silence around you. The afternoon light begins to soften into gold. Shadows lengthen across the packed earth. You feel a gentle fatigue settling into your limbs, yet also a deeper appreciation for the unseen labour that sustains this community. Without these countless acts of care, the bustling harbour and busy workshops would soon falter. You stop near a doorway where the scent of stew drifts invitingly into the street. A woman lifts the lid of a pot and stirs with deliberate calm. Steam rises in curling shapes, catching the last brightness of the day. The scene feels almost timeless. Nourishment, warmth, companionship. These are the quiet victories that shape human life across centuries. As you move on, the sounds of spinning wheels and washing tubs fade behind you. The town unfolds, further guiding you toward new encounters. You carry with you the steady impression that beneath every public achievement lies a foundation built by hands that rarely rest. You move onward through the mellowing afternoon, the golden light now slanting across rooftops and gathering in quiet pools along the streets. The sounds of labour have not disappeared, but they feel gentler, softened by the passage of hours. Ahead, you hear something different. A chorus of youthful voices rises in uneven rhythm, punctuated by sudden bursts of laughter. Curiosity draws you toward a small open yard beside a low wooden building. Children cluster near the doorway, some sitting cross-legged on the ground, others leaning against the wall, as though they cannot decide whether to stay or run free. Their clothes are patched, but tidy hair combed back with visible effort. You pause at the edge of the gathering, listening. Inside the room, a man's voice recites lines from a worn book. The children repeat after him, stumbling over certain words, then correcting themselves with solemn determination. In towns like Boston, during this period, schooling exists in simple forms that blend literacy with moral instruction. Lessons often take place in modest rooms like this one, guided by teachers who demand discipline as much as understanding. You step closer to the window and peer inside. A slate rests on each desk, chalk dust coating small fingers as they trace letters again and again. The faint scraping sound becomes part of the afternoon's music. A boy near the door clutches a hornbook, its thin sheet of printed text protected by a clear covering. He studies it with intense concentration, lips moving silently as he practices. The effort in his expression feels both touching and familiar. Learning here is not abstract. It is a practical step towards survival in a world where reading contracts and counting coins can determine one's future. Some recollections from the era describe how children's education often alternated with chores and apprenticeships, creating days that felt both structured and unpredictable. As you watch a girl suddenly leap to her feet when called to fetch water, you understand how fluid these routines must be. Childhood unfolds in fragments of study and labour. A group of younger boys begins rolling a wooden hoop along the ground with sticks, shouting encouragement as it wobbles toward the fence. Their play feels energetic yet purposeful, as though even games serve to sharpen balance and coordination. You smile at the sight, remembering how laughter can lighten the heaviest moments. There is still disagreement among modern historians about how widely formal schooling reached ordinary families in colonial towns. Some suggest literacy rates were surprisingly high. Others point to evidence of uneven access shaped by wealth and gender. Standing here, you sense that opportunity exists, yet it is not equally shared. Each child's path seems shaped by circumstance as much as by ambition. You wander into the yard and sit on a low stone wall. The surface is cool beneath you, grounding your thoughts. Nearby, two girls trade rhymes while skipping over a length of rope. Their voices rise and fall like birdsong. Dust swirls around their ankles, catching the light in soft golden clouds. You feel a gentle nostalgia, even though this world is still new to you. A small boy approaches and offers you a carved wooden toy shaped like a ship. Its edges are rough but lovingly crafted. You turn it in your hands, feeling the grooves left by a knife. Perhaps his father made it during a rare quiet evening. Perhaps the boy himself practiced the skill in secret. Objects here carry stories that stretch beyond their simple forms. Inside the schoolroom, the lesson shifts to numbers. The teacher writes figures on a board, his chalk squeaking faintly. The children repeat them in chorus, their voices blending into a steady hum. Arithmetic becomes a language of its own, a tool for navigating trade and household accounts. You sense how essential these skills will be as they grow older. A breeze drifts through the yard, carrying the scent of apples from a nearby stall. It mingles with the chalk dust and warm earth, creating a fragrance, both fresh and grounded. You close your eyes briefly, letting the moment settle. There is comfort in the rhythm of learning, in the shared effort to understand the world. Toward the edge of the yard, a pair of older boys practice writing their names with careful strokes. One frowns at his uneven letters, then tries again with renewed focus. Perseverance becomes a quiet virtue here. You feel an unexpected swell of admiration for their determination. As the sun dips lower, shadows lengthen across the ground. Parents begin to call their children home. The yard slowly empties, laughter fading into the distance. You remain seated for a moment, absorbing the gentle stillness that follows. Education, play, discipline, and hope have all mingled in this modest space. At last you rise and brush the dust from your coat. The carved toy ship rests briefly in your palm before you return it with a nod of thanks. The boy grins, then runs off to join his companions. You watch them disappear around a corner, their footsteps echoing faintly. With the evening drawing nearer, you turn back toward the street. The day continues to unfold, guiding you toward new encounters beneath the softening sky. In the quiet, after the children's voices, you sense how each lesson learned today will ripple outward into the future of this restless town. You leave the quiet yard behind and follow the sound of a distant bell that seems to roll slowly through the town like a wave. Its tone is deep and measured, neither urgent nor casual. It calls rather than commands. As you walk toward the source, the streets begin to shift in character once more. Conversations soften, footsteps slow. Even the restless dogs that roam the lane seem to pause and listen. Ahead, a meeting house rises with simple dignity against the evening sky. Its wooden walls are plain, its windows modest. Yet there is a gravity to the place that makes you instinctively lower your voice. People gather outside in small groups, adjusting cloaks and smoothing hair as though preparing for inspection. You sense that faith here is not only a matter of belief, it is also a matter of reputation. In communities like Boston, during the 1760s, church attendance shapes the weekly rhythm of life. The meeting house serves as a spiritual centre, as well as a place where news and social expectations quietly circulate. You step closer, hearing the murmur of greetings, exchanged with careful politeness. Each nod and handshake carries a subtle weight. To be seen is to be measured. A woman offers you a seat on a narrow bench inside. The wood feels firm beneath you, its surface worn smooth by years of devotion. Candlelight flickers gently along the walls, casting long shadows that seem to breathe with the movement of the flame. The air smells faintly of wax and wool, warm yet restrained. The minister begins to speak in a steady cadence. His voice fills the room without rising to a shout. It is calm, deliberate, designed to settle restless minds. You listen as he reflects on duty, humility, and the importance of community. His words seem to weave through the listeners like threads in a tapestry. Some bow their heads, others stare ahead with thoughtful intensity. Writers from the period occasionally note how sermons could last for hours, testing both patience and endurance. As you shift slightly on the hard bench, you understand how discipline becomes part of worship. Attention is not always effortless. It must be practiced like any other skill. A child near you fidgets, swinging his feet just above the floor. His mother gently stills him with a hand on his shoulder. The gesture is quiet but firm. You feel the tension between youthful energy and the expectation of reverence. Even the smallest movements here carry meaning. There remains uncertainty among modern scholars about how deeply religious teachings influenced everyday decisions in colonial towns. Some evidence suggests a powerful moral framework guiding behaviour. Other accounts reveal moments of contradiction and resistance. As you watch the congregation listen in thoughtful silence, you sense that faith can inspire both comfort and pressure. You glance around the room, noticing the careful arrangement of families. Clothing is neat. Postures are upright. A hush settles over the gathering like a shared agreement. Outside, the last light of day fades to soft blue. Inside, candle flames glow brighter, creating an atmosphere that feels both intimate and solemn. A lesser-known custom mentioned in certain letters describes how community members sometimes used church gatherings to observe potential marriages or business alliances. You catch a glimpse of this subtle scrutiny in the way eyes meet across the benches. Conversations will follow later, perhaps over supper or by the hearth. Social life here flows quietly beneath the surface of devotion. The minister's voice rises slightly as he reaches the heart of his message. His words echo off the wooden walls, filling the space with a sense of purpose. You feel a ripple of emotion move through the room. For some it is comfort. For others it may be challenge. You find yourself breathing more slowly, drawn into the collective stillness. A hymn begins. Voices lift together, hesitant at first then stronger as confidence grows. The melody is simple but hauntingly beautiful. It lingers in the air long after the final note fades. You sense how music binds people in ways that spoken language cannot. When the gathering ends, the congregation steps outside into the cool evening. Stars begin to appear above the rooftops, faint but steady. Conversations resume in low tones. Plans are made. Advice is offered. The meeting house has not only nourished the spirit, it has reinforced the delicate network of relationships that sustains the town. You walk slowly away, the echo of hymn and sermon still resonating in your thoughts. The bell tolls once more, softer now, as though marking the transition from sacred reflection back to daily routine. You feel both calm and contemplative, aware that faith here is woven tightly into the fabric of life. The street stretches ahead in gathering twilight. Lanterns flicker to life in doorways. The town settles into a quieter rhythm, preparing for the uncertainties of night. You move forward with a deeper understanding of how belief and observation shape every corner of colonial Boston. You continue along the dimming street as evening deepens the hush from the meeting house still lingering gently in your thoughts. Yet the calm does not last long. A different reality begins to make itself known in the changing air. The scent shifts first. It grows heavier, more complicated. Smoke from hearth fires mingles with odours less comforting. You notice how quickly the town's fragile sense of order gives way to reminders of physical vulnerability. A narrow gutter runs along the edge of the road, carrying a sluggish trickle of murky water. You step carefully to avoid splashing it onto your boots. The ground feels damp and uneven beneath your feet. Somewhere nearby, a cough echoes sharply through the twilight. It lingers in your mind like a warning. In towns like Boston during this century, illness remains a constant presence woven into everyday life. Medical knowledge exists but is limited by the tools and beliefs of the time. Families rely on home remedies, herbal mixtures, and the cautious guidance of local healers. You pass a doorway where a woman fans the smoke from a bundle of burning herbs. The scent is pungent, almost bitter. It curls into the street as though carrying hope with it. Inside the house, a child lies bundled in blankets. His face glows faintly in the firelight. You glimpse his mother pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. Her expression is calm but strained. Caregiving here requires patience and quiet strength. You feel a wave of empathy that crosses centuries without effort. Some letters from the period hint at unusual treatments meant to ward off sickness. Tonic brews, mustard poultices, even charms worn close to the skin. As you continue walking, you see a small charm tied to a door latch, its purpose unclear, yet deeply sincere. In uncertain times, belief becomes another form of medicine. A physician passes you on the street, his coat brushing against your sleeve. The fabric smells faintly of camphor and vinegar. He carries a leather satchel filled with instruments that glint softly in the lantern light. You sense both authority and limitation in his hurried stride. Healing is as much an art as a science here. Researchers studying colonial health practices still disagree on how effective certain remedies truly were. Records show both recovery and loss, often without clear explanation. As you watch the physician disappear around a corner, you feel the weight of that uncertainty. Survival sometimes depends on chance as much as care. You turn into a quieter lane where the night seems to settle more heavily. The sound of chamber pots being emptied from upper windows reaches you in irregular splashes. You flatten yourself against a wall. to avoid an unpleasant surprise. Cleanliness is a goal rather than a guarantee. Yet even in these conditions, people strive to maintain dignity. The textures of the evening press gently against your senses. Cool air brushes your cheeks. Damp straw crunches beneath your boots. Somewhere a door creaks open, releasing a thin line of candlelight onto the ground. You pause to listen. Inside voices murmur in soft reassurance. The rhythm of human concern feels universal. A small apothecary shop glows invitingly at the end of the lane. Glass jars line the shelves within, filled with dried roots and powders of various shades. You step closer to the window, studying the labels written in careful script. Lavender, sage, valerian. The fragrances drift outward, mingling with the sharper smells of the street. For a moment the air feels almost healing. A curious note preserved in certain accounts mentions that some residents believe fresh sea air could prevent disease. You recall the bright harbour from earlier and wonder how many people walk there seeking relief. The idea carries a quiet poetry, even if its effectiveness remains uncertain. As you continue walking, you hear distant church bells marking the passing hour. Their sound feels softer now, wrapped in the stillness of night. Lanterns flicker in doorways like small guardians against the dark. You sense how fragile each household must feel in the face of sickness and hardship. A woman sweeps her doorstep with determined strokes, pushing dust and refuse into the gutter. Her actions seem symbolic as well as practical. Order is something to be defended daily. You watch her for a moment, admiring the quiet resolve in her posture. The lane opens once more onto a broader street, where voices carry more easily. A group of neighbours gathers around a man who appears pale and unsteady. They support him with careful hands, guiding him toward a nearby house. Compassion becomes visible in such gestures. Community offers protection where medicine cannot always succeed. You feel the cool night deepen around you as you move forward. Stars emerge between drifting clouds. Their distant light contrasts with the immediacy of human frailty below. Life here demands resilience. It also invites moments of tenderness that shine brightly against the uncertainty. With a steady breath, you continue your walk through the dim streets. The town does not sleep easily. It breathes, coughs, hopes, and endures. You carry this awareness with you, a quiet understanding of how fragile and precious each ordinary day can be. You move onward through the dim streets with the quiet awareness of illness still lingering in your thoughts. The night air grows cooler as you walk, brushing softly against your face, like a whispered reminder that time never stands still. Ahead, the town seems to shift once more. A gust of wind rattles loose shutters and carries with it the faint scent of distant snow. You begin to sense how deeply the changing seasons shape every detail of life here. Winter in Boston arrives with little ceremony and considerable force. The memory of it hangs in every conversation, even on mild evenings like this one. People speak of frozen harbours of firewood stacked high against uncertainty of breath, turning to mist in the morning light. You imagine the streets buried beneath thick drifts, footsteps muffled by white silence. Survival becomes a matter of preparation rather than luck. You pass a doorway where a family tends a roaring hearth. Flames leap and curl, casting golden light across rough walls. The heat reaches you in comforting waves as you linger for a moment outside. Inside, a kettle sings softly on its hook. The smell of boiling broth drifts into the street. Such simple warmth must feel like a treasure during the coldest months. In summer, the challenge shifts. The same narrow lanes that now feel crisp and calm can grow heavy with stagnant air. Residents speak of heat pressing down like an invisible hand of insects, humming restlessly in the dusk. Records from the time paint a vivid picture of how weather shapes mood as much as routine. Seasons dictate what people eat, how they work, and even how they sleep. You continue along the road, noticing how wind slips through gaps in the buildings with playful persistence. It tugs at your coat and whispers across the ground, stirring dust into brief spirals. The textures of climate surround you. Cool stone beneath your boots, damp air against your lips. The town itself seems to breathe in response. A small boy runs past carrying an armful of kindling. His cheeks glow pink in the lantern light. He disappears into a doorway where laughter greets his arrival. You sense the quiet relief of a household that has gathered enough fuel for another night. Firewood becomes more than a resource. It becomes reassurance. In certain journals, people describe storing food carefully against the long winter stretch, drying herbs and salting fish to preserve their usefulness. You imagine rows of barrels tucked into shadowed corners, each one representing a promise of sustenance. Preparation becomes a ritual repeated year after year. There remains some uncertainty among modern interpreters about how dramatically seasonal hardships differed between wealthy families and those of more modest means. As you glance toward a large house glowing warmly at the end of the street, then back at the humbler dwellings around you, the contrast feels quietly undeniable. Comfort seems to gather where resources allow. You pause beside a narrow alley where snow from an earlier storm still clings stubbornly to the ground in pale patches. It crunches softly under your step, releasing a faint, clean scent. The sound feels oddly soothing. Winter silence has its own music, one that invites reflection rather than haste. Further on, you notice laundry hung carefully near a fire to dry. Steam curls upward in ghost-like shapes. The act of washing becomes more difficult when water freezes in the pump. Yet people adapt with steady resilience. Routine bends, but does not break. A curious memory surfaces of summer markets filled with buzzing flies and overflowing baskets of fruit. You can almost taste the sweetness in the air, feel the sticky warmth on your skin. The contrast between seasons sharpens your understanding of this place. Boston lives not only in space, but in cycles of time. You continue walking, aware that your own breath now forms faint clouds in the night. The stars overhead appear sharper, their light colder. Somewhere a door creaks open, releasing a burst of laughter that fades quickly into the quiet. Even joy must adjust itself to weather's demands. A lantern swings gently from a post, its flame flickering in the breeze. Shadows dance across the ground like restless memories. You feel both small and strangely comforted beneath the wide sky. Life here requires endurance, yet it also offers moments of beauty shaped by frost and sunlight alike. As you move toward the edge of the street, the town settles into a deeper stillness. The wind softens. Footsteps grow fewer. You carry with you the growing awareness that survival in colonial Boston is never static. It changes with the turning of the seasons, teaching patience and humility to those who listen. With steady steps, you continue forward into the cool night, ready to discover how evening transforms the social heartbeat of this restless town. You follow the gentle pull of voices drifting through the evening air, guided by a warmth that feels different from the glow of hearth fires. The street ahead flickers with lantern light. Shadows stretch and sway, as though the town itself is breathing more slowly now. After a day shaped by work and watchfulness, people begin to gather in places where conversation flows more freely. A tavern stands open at the corner, its doorway spilling laughter onto the packed earth. You hesitate only briefly before stepping inside. The room greets you with a wave of sound and scent. Wood smoke, spilled ale, damp wool, and roasting meat mingle into an atmosphere that feels both chaotic and comforting. The floor creaks underfoot as you make your way toward a bench along the wall. Men and women sit close together at rough tables, mugs lifted in quiet celebration of survival through another demanding day. A fiddle plays somewhere near the hearth, its tune lively but not overwhelming. You feel the vibration of its strings in the air around you. Music becomes a shared language, bridging differences in status and mood. In towns like Boston, taverns often serve as informal centres of social exchange. News travels quickly across these tables. Stories of distant voyages mix with complaints about rising prices and unpredictable weather. You watch a sailor gesture broadly as he describes a storm at sea. His listeners lean in with equal parts fascination and skepticism. An odd detail mentioned in certain diaries suggests that tavern keepers sometimes extended credit to regular patrons, trusting reputation as much as coin. As you observe a man scribbling notes in a small ledger near the counter, you begin to understand how relationships can shape economic life as surely as official rules. You lift a mug offered by a friendly stranger. The ale is cool and faintly bitter, carrying a hint of smoke from the wooden barrel in which it aged. The taste lingers pleasantly on your tongue. Around you, conversation rises and falls like the tide. Someone bursts into laughter. Someone else mutters about a broken cartwheel. Every voice adds a thread to the evening's tapestry. There remains some debate among historians about how inclusive such spaces truly were. While taverns could bring diverse groups together, they also reflected the social divisions of the time. As you glance across the room, you notice clusters forming around shared trades or backgrounds. Yet there are also moments of easy camaraderie that defy expectation. You run your fingers along the edge of the table, feeling grooves worn by years of restless hands. Candlelight flickers across its surface, creating patterns that seem to shift with every movement. The warmth of the crowded room settles into your bones. Fatigue softens into a quiet contentment. Near the hearth, a woman sings in a clear, steady voice. Her song tells of home left behind and horizons yet to be reached. The melody carries a note of longing that touches something deep within you. Even in celebration there is room for reflection. Lives here are shaped by journeys both chosen and forced. A group of apprentices gathers near the door, sharing bread and stories in equal measure. Their laughter rings bright, cutting through the low murmur of older patrons. Youth finds ways to claim joy even in uncertain times. You watch them with a faint smile, remembering the classroom yard from earlier in the day. Outside, the night grows darker. A cool breeze slips through the open doorway, stirring the lantern flame. You feel its chill against your neck, a reminder that comfort inside is always temporary. Soon you will step back into the quiet streets where shadows stretch longer and footsteps echo more clearly. Before you leave, you pause to listen once more to the fiddle's tune. Its rhythm feels almost hypnotic, guiding your thoughts toward calm. The tavern's glow becomes a small island of warmth in a town that never fully rests. Social life here thrives on shared moments like this. They offer relief from labour and worry, even if only for an hour. You rise from the bench and nod your thanks to the stranger who first greeted you. The door swings open with a familiar creak as you step into the night. Lantern light fades behind you, replaced by the cool clarity of starlit air. Somewhere down the street, voices still linger in low conversation. You continue walking, aware that Boston's evening has its own distinct rhythm. Gossip music and quiet companionship weave together beneath the wide sky. The day's demands loosen their grip for a time, allowing reflection to settle gently over the town. With steady breath and unhurried steps, you move onward into the darkness, ready to encounter another layer of life unfolding in this restless colonial world. You leave the tavern's glow behind and step deeper into the night. The air feels cooler now, clearer somehow, as though conversation and music have been left to drift gently upward into the dark. Lanterns burn at intervals along the street, casting small circles of gold onto the ground. Between them, shadows gather like pools of quiet thought. Your footsteps sound louder in this stillness. Even the town's restless energy seems to pause for a moment. As you walk, you begin to notice another presence woven into the fabric of Boston. It does not always stand in plain sight, yet its influence shapes daily routines and expectations. You pass a modest house, where a faint light glows through the shutters. The door stands slightly open, revealing a scene of quiet labour within. A man kneels beside a stack of firewood, splitting kindling with careful controlled strikes. Nearby, a woman folds linen in neat practiced motions. Inside this household, you also see a figure whose position feels different. A young black man carries a bucket across the floor, moving with a mixture of purpose and restraint. His gaze flickers toward the door, then returns to his task. Encounters like this were part of life in colonial Boston. Though the town is often remembered for its role in the story of liberty, it also includes people whose freedoms are sharply limited. Some records from the time describe enslaved individuals working in home shops and along the waterfront. Their labour contributes quietly to the town's prosperity, yet their stories often remain scattered across letters and legal documents rather than preserved in full voice. You feel a heaviness in your chest as you watch the young man set down the bucket and step back into shadow. You continue walking, turning onto a broader road where a few figures linger near a well. Their conversation is low and cautious. One woman speaks of a relative who has earned wages and begun to build a small measure of independence. Such moments hint at the complex realities of status and identity in this era. Life cannot be reduced to simple categories. It unfolds in shades of struggle and resilience. Modern scholars still examine how many black residents in Boston lived in bondage and how many navigated fragile paths toward freedom. The evidence offers glimpses rather than certainty. As you move past the well, you sense that each individual carries a story shaped by both hope and hardship. A soft wind stirs the branches of a nearby tree. Leaves whisper against one another like distant voices. You feel the rough bark beneath your fingers as you pause beside the trunk. The texture grounds you, reminding you that history is not only written in grand events, but also in quiet encounters such as this. Further along, you notice a small gathering near a doorway lit by candlelight. A group of black residents stands together, sharing food and conversation. Their laughter is gentle, but unmistakably warm. Community grows wherever people find space to nurture it. Even in uncertain circumstances, bonds of friendship and kinship offer strength. A lesser-known detail preserved in certain accounts suggests that some enslaved individuals in Boston attended church services alongside free residents. As you recall the meeting house from earlier, you wonder how faith might have shaped their sense of belonging or exclusion. Questions linger without easy answers. The night deepens, Stars multiply across the sky like scattered embers. Your breath forms faint clouds as the temperature drops. You pull your coat closer and continue your slow walk. Somewhere a door closes with a hollow thud. Somewhere else a lullaby drifts through an open window. The town feels both intimate and vast in its layered experiences. You pass a small shop where a candle burns low behind the glass. Its flickering light reveals shelves of goods that few can afford. Wealth and limitation coexist here, shaping lives in ways that ripple across generations. You sense how invisible lines divide opportunity from hardship. As you reach the end of the street, you turn once more to look back. The scattered lanterns resemble constellations on the earth below. Each one marks a household filled with stories unfolding quietly in the dark. Among them are tales of endurance that deserve to be remembered with care. You continue forward with a thoughtful calm settling over you. Boston's nighttime world has revealed truths that daylight sometimes conceals. The path ahead remains uncertain, yet you walk it with growing awareness of the many voices that shape this colonial town. You continue along the shadowed street, your thoughts still turning quietly after the encounters of the night. Boston does not fully sleep. Even at this late hour, the town carries a restless energy that feels close to the surface. Ahead you hear a sudden swell of voices rising in agitation rather than laughter. Lantern light flickers against walls, revealing clusters of people gathered at a crossroads. You approach slowly, sensing tension in the air. A group of men stands near a cart piled with crates. Their expressions are tight words, sharp and clipped. Someone gestures toward the harbour with visible frustration. Someone else mutters about unfair demands and distant authorities who seem to understand little of daily struggle here. You feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down like an approaching storm. Public life in Boston during this decade often spills onto the streets in such moments. Political disagreement is not confined to private discussion. It unfolds in full view of neighbours carried by raised voices and urgent gestures. You watch as one man lifts a torch higher, its flame bending in the breeze. The light catches the edges of anxious faces, turning them briefly into silhouettes of resolve. You move closer, careful not to intrude. The smell of smoke and damp earth fills your lungs. Boots scuff against the packed ground as people shift impatiently. Rumours pass from one mouth to another like sparks searching for dry kindling. Words such as tax protest and rights drift through the crowd. Their meaning feels heavy even if you do not grasp every detail. A young apprentice stands near the edge of the gathering, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. He clutches his cap in nervous hands. Moments like this can shape a lifetime. The town's future may seem distant during quiet mornings, yet here in the flickering dark, it feels immediate and urgent. There are hints in surviving newspapers and letters that gatherings like this were not uncommon in the years leading toward revolution. Crowds sometimes formed, quickly driven by frustration as much as by hope. Standing here, you sense how fragile the line is between conversation and confrontation. A sudden cheer breaks the tension. Someone begins to speak with surprising eloquence, voice rising above the murmur. He talks of fairness, of dignity, of the right to be heard. The crowd leans closer. Even you feel drawn in by the conviction in his tone. For a moment the night itself seems to listen. You notice the texture of the moment in small details. The heat of the torch on your face. The faint tremor in the ground as people shift their weight. The distant cry of a gull reminding you that the harbour is never far away. Boston's identity is tied to trade and authority, yet also to a growing desire for self-determination. A cartwheel creaks as someone pushes it forward, clearing space for those who want to speak. Lanterns sway on their hooks, sending restless patterns across the walls. You realise how public spaces transform into stages for shared emotion. The town becomes both audience and participant in its own unfolding story. A man near you mutters that nothing will change. Another insists that change has already begun. Their exchange feels quiet yet profound. Uncertainty hangs between them, like a question that cannot be answered tonight. Such disagreements ripple outward, shaping conversations at hearths and market stalls alike. You step back slightly, allowing the crowd to swell around you. The air grows warmer with human presence. You feel the brush of sleeves, the accidental pressure of shoulders. It is impossible to remain untouched by the collective mood. Even silence seems charged with meaning. Somewhere in the distance, a bell begins to toll its sound, measured and calm. The contrast with the restless voices feels almost surreal. Order and unrest coexist in uneasy balance. You sense that the town stands at a threshold, though no one can yet see clearly what lies beyond. Gradually, the gathering begins to disperse. People drift away in small groups, still talking in low tones. The torchlight fades into scattered glimmers. You remain for a moment longer, absorbing the echo of shared determination. The street feels wider now, yet also more uncertain. As you turn to leave, the wind rises slightly, carrying with it the scent of salt and smoke. You draw your coat closer and continue your slow walk. Boston's night has revealed another layer of itself. Beneath the routines of work and worship, a deeper current moves steadily forward. With thoughtful steps, you follow the road into quieter darkness. The town settles once more into shadow, yet the memory of raised voices lingers in your mind. Something is shifting here, subtle yet unmistakable, like the tide before dawn. You continue along the cooling street, your thoughts still humming faintly with the energy of the crowd you have just left behind. The night feels quieter now, yet not entirely calm. Boston seems to carry its tensions even in stillness, like a held breath waiting to be released. A thin mist drifts in from the harbour, softening the edges of buildings and lantern light. You follow the curve of the road until the scent of tea and damp rope begins to mingle in the air. Ahead, a warehouse door stands partly open. A single lantern glows inside, revealing the silhouettes of stacked chests and bundled crates. You pause near the entrance, hearing low voices within. Two men lean over a table, speaking in hushed tones, as though secrecy itself were part of the transaction. Their fingers tap against rough wood, tracing invisible calculations in the dim light. Trade in this era rarely follows a simple or predictable path. Goods arrive from distant ports, taxed and inspected under rules that change with political winds. Some merchants obey every regulation. Others search for quieter ways to move cargo beyond official notice. The harbour you admired earlier becomes a stage for both lawful commerce and whispered arrangements. You step carefully onto the threshold, feeling the chill of the stone floor beneath your boots. The air smells faintly of spices and damp canvas. A crate stands open nearby, revealing bundles wrapped in dark cloth. One corner has come loose, exposing the pale leaves within. Tea, you realise, though it looks far less romantic here than in porcelain cups. A sudden laugh breaks the tension. One of the men shrugs and pours a measure of the fragrant leaves into a smaller sack. He glances toward the door, then returns to his task with renewed urgency. Such scenes appear in scattered accounts from the period, hinting at the complex relationship between law, profit, and survival. Not every transaction takes place in daylight. Outside, the mist thickens. You step back into it, allowing the cool moisture to brush against your cheeks. The street feels strangely hushed, as though guarding the secrets of those who walk it. Somewhere a shutter bangs softly against a frame. Somewhere else footsteps fade into silence. You move onward, passing a row of modest shops now dark for the night. Their signs creak gently in the breeze. Painted letters catch the lantern glow for a moment before disappearing into shadow. You imagine the goods displayed there during the day, cloth dyed deep blue, pewter cups arranged in careful rows, tea measured into paper parcels for customers who can afford such luxuries. There is still uncertainty among historians about how widespread smuggling truly was in colonial ports like Boston. Some believe it shaped daily commerce far more than official records suggest. Others argue that most trade remained visible and regulated. As you walk past the quiet storefronts, you sense that truth may lie somewhere between rumour and record. At the end of the lane, you find a small group gathered around a fire barrel. The flames flicker upward, casting warm light onto faces drawn tight with worry. They speak of new duties imposed on imported goods, of inspections that delay shipments, of rising prices that strain household budgets. Economic pressure feels personal here, measured in bread loaves and winter fuel rather than distant policy. You crouch near the fire, feeling its heat soak into your chilled hands. Sparks drift into the night like fleeting thoughts. The conversation shifts from complaint to determination. Someone suggests refusing certain goods altogether. Another insists that resistance must be cautious. Their words carry a mix of fear and resolve. A curious detail recorded in a merchant's diary mentions that some colonists quietly stored tea in hidden compartments, waiting for a moment when its sale might prove safer. You glance at the dark windows around you and wonder how many such secrets lie tucked behind them. The town seems full of hidden currents, each one shaping the course of events. You stand and continue your slow walk, the fire's warmth fading behind you. The mist begins to thin, revealing a clearer view of the stars overhead. They seem distant and indifferent to the worries below. Yet their steady presence offers a strange comfort. As you reach the harbour once more, the water glimmers faintly under the moon. Ships rock gently at anchor, their silhouettes dark against the silver surface. You feel the pull of their journeys, the promise of horizons yet unseen. Boston's struggles are part of a larger story unfolding across oceans and empires. With quiet reflection, you turn back towards the heart of the town. The streets feel narrower now, as though closing protectively around the lives they contain. Each step carries you deeper into the layered reality of colonial existence. Trade tensions, secrecy and hope intertwine beneath the night sky. You draw a slow breath and continue onward, sensing that the days ahead will bring changes no one here can fully predict. The town whispers its uncertainties to you in the rustle of wind and the creak of distant rigging. You leave the harbour's quiet shimmer behind and walk slowly toward a different part of town, where the buildings begin to change in subtle but unmistakable ways. The streets grow cleaner, doorways appear wider, lanterns burn brighter and more steadily in polished glass. Even the air feels different here, carrying the faint scent of perfumed soap rather than smoke and damp rope. Boston reveals another face to you, one shaped by comfort and privilege. You pause before a large house set slightly back from the road. Its windows glow warmly, curtains drawn just enough to suggest privacy rather than secrecy. Through the glass you glimpse polished furniture and table laid with careful precision. Candles stand in silver holders, their flames steady and elegant. The scene feels almost unreal after the rough textures you have encountered throughout the day. Life in colonial towns does not unfold evenly across all households. Some families enjoy a measure of security that others can only imagine. You step closer to the gate, feeling the smooth iron beneath your fingertips. It is cool and finely worked, a small detail that speaks of wealth without needing to boast. A carriage rattles past its wheels, rolling more softly than the carts you saw earlier. The horse's harness gleams in the lantern light. Inside, you catch a glimpse of a gentleman adjusting his gloves with deliberate care. His coat fits perfectly, its fabric rich and unblemished. Such refinement creates a quiet distance from the everyday struggles that define most lives here. Yet not far away, a different reality unfolds. You turn the corner and find yourself in a narrow alley where shadows gather thickly between leaning walls. A woman sits on a step, mending a tear in her only shawl. The lantern beside her flickers uncertainly, its flame bending with each breath of wind. Poverty does not hide itself in this part of Boston. It lingers in worn clothing and empty baskets. The contrast between these worlds feels striking. Comfort and hardship exist side by side, often separated by only a few streets. Some travellers from the era describe this unevenness with a mixture of admiration and unease. Prosperity can inspire hope. It can also sharpen awareness of what is missing. You continue walking, noticing how sound changes with surroundings. In wealthier districts, voices carry a softer tone. Laughter is restrained, conversation measured. In humbler quarters, life feels louder and more immediate. Doors slam, children shout, pots clatter against stone hearths. The town's social fabric reveals itself through these subtle differences. A faint melody drifts from an upstairs window. Someone practices a harpsichord piece, notes rising and falling with delicate precision. You stop to listen, feeling the music ripple through the night air. It is beautiful and distant at the same time, like a memory you cannot quite place. Moments like this remind you that culture flourishes wherever resources allow space for leisure. Further along, you pass a group of labourers sharing a late meal around a low fire. Their hands are rough, their voices warm with companionship. A loaf of bread is broken and passed from one to another without ceremony. Generosity here feels instinctive rather than calculated. Survival often depends on such simple acts of kindness. Accounts preserved from the period sometimes suggest that wealth in colonial Boston could shift quickly with the fortunes of trade. A prosperous merchant might face sudden loss after a failed voyage. A modest craftsman might find opportunity through persistence and luck. Standing between these contrasting scenes, you sense how fragile social status can be. You step onto a small rise where the town stretches out beneath you in scattered lights. Some windows glow brightly, others remain dark. Each one marks a household navigating its own hopes and fears. The night breeze brushes gently against your face, carrying the mingled scents of stew smoke and sea salt. You find yourself reflecting on how comfort shapes perception. In a well-lit room with polished floors, worries may seem distant. In a cramped space with thin walls, every uncertainty feels immediate. Boston contains both realities at once, asking its residents to adapt with resilience and imagination. A dog trots past, pausing briefly to sniff at your boots, before disappearing into shadow. Its presence feels oddly reassuring. Even animals move easily between these worlds, guided by instinct rather than social expectation. As you descend the rise and return to the quieter street below, you carry with you a deeper understanding of the town's uneven landscape. Wealth and hardship intertwine like threads in a woven cloth. Neither can be fully understood without the other. You continue walking beneath the wide sky, aware that the night has grown gentler. Lanterns burn lower. Footsteps become fewer. Boston prepares itself for rest, even as the currents of change continue to move beneath its surface. You walk slowly through streets that have begun to empty at last. The bustle of trade argument, prayer and laughter has softened into something far more intimate. Boston at night feels like a different place entirely. The same narrow lanes that seem crowded and urgent by day now stretch quietly ahead, washed in pale moonlight. Your footsteps sound clearer, more deliberate, as though the town itself is listening. A lantern burns low beside a doorway, its flame bending gently in the breeze. You pause there for a moment, letting the stillness settle around you. From within the house comes the faint clatter of dishes being stacked, followed by a murmur of tired voices. Evening routines unfold behind closed doors. Meals finished, tools set aside, stories exchanged in the glow of dying embers. You move on, guided by the soft pattern of light and shadow. A window stands partly open, releasing the scent of wood smoke and stewed vegetables into the night air. You hear the slow cadence of a lullaby sung to a restless child. The melody drifts after you for several steps before fading into silence. In these quiet moments, the town feels deeply human. Grand events seem distant. What matters now is warmth, rest, and the reassurance of familiar company. A cat slips across your path with silent confidence. Its fur catches the moonlight for an instant, before disappearing into darkness. Creatures of the night navigate these streets as easily as merchants do by day. You feel a small smile tug at your lips. Life continues in many forms, often unnoticed. You pass a row of houses, where shutters have been drawn tight against the chill. Inside, families prepare for sleep in spaces that must hold both comfort and unease. Beds are shared, blankets are scarce. Yet there is also a sense of closeness that modern distance rarely provides. You imagine whispered conversations lingering long after candles are extinguished. Further along, you notice a man seated on a stoop pipe, glowing faintly in the darkness. He nods as you approach, exhaling a thin stream of smoke that curls upward like a question. Perhaps he is reflecting on the events of the day. Perhaps he simply enjoys the quiet before dawn's demands return. You feel the weight of fatigue in your own limbs now, a gentle heaviness that invites slower breathing. In a nearby courtyard, someone tends the last coals of a fire. The embers pulse softly, casting red light onto the surrounding walls. A kettle rests above them, releasing a faint hiss of steam. The scene feels almost ritualistic. Ending the day with care ensures that morning will begin with possibility rather than struggle. You wander toward the edge of town where the harbour lies hidden beyond dark rooftops. The distant creak of rigging reaches your ears, a reminder that ships never fully sleep. Trade and ambition continue even as households seek rest. The wider world presses quietly against Boston's boundaries, shaping dreams and anxieties alike. A gust of wind lifts loose straw along the road. It brushes against your boots with a dry whisper. You draw your coat closer, feeling the chill settle into your bones. Night has a way of revealing truths that daylight obscures. Here in the stillness, you sense the fragile balance between hope and uncertainty that defines this colonial life. You turn back toward the heart of the town, guided by instinct rather than urgency. Lanterns flicker out one by one, leaving stretches of shadow that feel almost sacred. The stars overhead seem brighter now, the distant glow steady and reassuring. You breathe deeply, letting the quiet enter you. As you pass another doorway, you glimpse a family gathered around a small table. Their faces are lit by a single candle, hands clasped in silent gratitude before sleep. The simplicity of the gesture touches you. It reminds you that endurance often begins with small acts of faith. Your steps grow slower as the night deepens. The town feels wrapped in a protective hush, as though gathering strength for whatever tomorrow may bring. You carry with you the layered impressions of the day, the harbour's restless energy, the warmth of crowded rooms, the murmur of voices raised in concern or celebration. Boston rests now, but not entirely. Beneath its quiet surface, change continues to stir. You sense it in the wind, in the distant echo of waves, in the thoughtful expressions of those you have passed. History is not a sudden storm. It is a tide that rises almost imperceptibly until one day it cannot be ignored. You walk on beneath the moon, feeling both weary and strangely at peace. The path ahead leads toward rest, reflection, and the gentle closing of this long journey through a single colonial day. You continue your quiet walk as the night settles into its deepest stillness. Boston feels softer now, as though the town itself has grown drowsy after a long day of effort and emotion. The wind has eased. The streets lie calm beneath the pale glow of moon and fading lantern light. Your footsteps slow, almost without your noticing. There is no longer any need to hurry. Nothing demands your attention except the gentle unfolding of the final hours before dawn. You pass the familiar outlines of houses that only this morning seemed busy and crowded. Now they appear almost tender in their stillness. A faint line of smoke rises from a chimney, dissolving into the cool air. Somewhere a door creaks open and then closes again with careful quiet. Someone checking the fire. Someone stepping out briefly to feel the night on their face. These small motions remind you that life never truly pauses, even when rest claims the body. You drift toward a slight rise where the rooftops give way to a distant view of the harbour. The water lies dark and calm, its surface catching scattered fragments of starlight. Ships rock gently in their sleep like patient animals waiting for morning. You remember the bustle of arrival, the noise of trade, the sharp scent of tar and salt. Now everything feels hushed, as though the day's memories have been wrapped in a soft blanket. Your breathing grows slower. The rhythm of your steps becomes steady and unforced. You feel the lingering warmth of hearth fires that once welcomed you, the echo of hymns and fiddle tunes that filled the air. Each experience settles quietly into place, forming a mosaic of impressions that no longer demand analysis. They simply exist. A breeze passes across the hill, brushing lightly against your coat. It carries the faint smell of damp earth and distant sea. The sensation is cool but not unpleasant. It feels like a gentle invitation to release the tension you have carried. You stand still for a moment, letting the quiet surround you completely. Below, scattered windows glow faintly in the darkness. Families sleep. Apprentices dream of tomorrow's tasks. Merchants imagine fortunes rising and falling with the tide. Children rest after days filled with lessons and laughter. You sense the collective heartbeat of the town, slow and steady beneath the silence. Even uncertainty seems to have softened into something manageable. You begin to walk again, choosing the most peaceful streets almost by instinct. The packed earth beneath your boots feels reassuringly solid. The sound of your movement blends with the faint rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of water. Night becomes a companion rather than a mystery. There is comfort in the knowledge that countless days like this have passed before you, and countless more will follow. The routines of colonial life continue with quiet persistence. Bread will be baked again, fires will be lit, voices will rise in argument and song. History unfolds not only in dramatic moments, but in the steady repetition of ordinary acts. You notice how the stars appear brighter now that your eyes have adjusted to the darkness. They scatter across the sky, impatient constellations unchanged by the concerns below. Their light feels calming, a reminder that time moves gently, even when human hearts beat quickly. A distant bell sounds once, then fades. Perhaps it marks the passing hour. Perhaps it simply echoes through the sleeping town as a final reassurance that order still exists. You listen until the last vibration disappears into the night. Your path leads you back toward the quiet heart of Boston. The streets are nearly empty. A single lantern flickers at the corner, its flame small but persistent. You pause there, feeling the warmth of the glass against your fingertips. The simple glow feels like a promise that morning will come. You think of the people you have glimpsed throughout this journey, the workers, the children, the families gathered around humble tables, the merchants calculating risks by candlelight, the voices raised in hope for change. All of them rest now beneath the same sky. Their lives form a story that continues long after this night ends. The air grows cooler still. You draw a slow breath and let it out gently. Fatigue settles into your shoulders in a way that feels almost welcome. You have walked through the rhythms of a colonial day. You have listened to its sounds, touched its textures, tasted its simple food. Now it is time to let those impressions fade into the background of sleep. You find a quiet place near a familiar doorway and sit for a moment, allowing your thoughts to drift. The lantern's glow softens. The distant harbour becomes only a memory. Even the stars seem to dim as your eyelids grow heavier. There is nothing more you need to do. The town will carry on without your watchful steps. Its people will rise again with the sun guided by routines shaped over generations. You can release your curiosity now and sink into the calm that follows understanding. Let the quiet settle deeper. Let the sounds of Boston blend into a gentle hush. Imagine the slow turning of the earth beneath you, the steady promise of another dawn waiting beyond the horizon. In this moment, you are simply present, breathing, resting, safe. Sleep comes like a tide rising softly around your thoughts. The long journey through colonial streets fades into peaceful darkness. You drift with it, carried towards the dreams where history and imagination intertwine in gentle harmony. Sweet dreams.